Welcome back, everybody, to the sSEC Weekly Show. I'm your host, Ezeco, and I apologize for the lateness of this video. I've been sick all week. It's been a fun time. Apparently, when you get old, you get allergies. So we are going to check in with Week 13 SEC action here. This is simulated college football. It is not the real SEC. It's not real college football. But don't let that scare you. Head down to the links in the description. Check us out. Check out what's going on. Still a couple teams left open in the SEC. Even though the season's winding down, we are getting ready to ramp up for college basketball season. So come check us out. Get interested. It's a really fun time. But before we get the season over with, we do have some games still left to play. We've got 6 teams playing this week. The other 8 are on bye. We do have 6 heading out of conference, with UTEP coming to visit Auburn, Southern Miss coming to visit Mississippi State, and then 4 teams heading away on the road, with Arkansas going to UTSA, Georgia heading over to Georgia Southern, LSU taking on Kent State, and Vanderbilt visiting Wake Forest. Not a whole lot of big games in terms of importance or rivalry. Although that Mississippi State Southern Miss, that could be a budding rivalry. Georgia and Georgia Southern. The better Georgia Southern does, the more that could be a potential for Georgia to keep looking at every year. But there are a lot of important battles here for bowl eligibility. Taking a quick look at the top 25 for the SEC, we're still at 3 teams. None of them are in action this week. We got number 4 Tennessee, number 11 Alabama, and number 15 Missouri, all on bye this week. But we're still hanging on to those 3 teams in the top 25, which is a good spot for us to be as a conference. Although we want more, but 3 is up there with the rest of the big boys. So taking on our first game, we've got Auburn and UTEP, and it's just an absolute slaughter. Auburn rolls UTEP 62-13. Game wasn't even ever close or even thought about being close. Auburn 45 for 62 on their passing, 72.5% completion rate. We've talked about Auburn before and how they just abuse that air raid. 572 yards, 7 touchdowns through the air. They do throw an interception and give up a sack, but they spread all of that through only 6 different receivers. They do move it on the ground a little bit. You got to give the arm a break a little. They rush it through 3 different guys with 21 times. They only move it 47 yards, but they do pick up an 8th touchdown on the ground. So even though they're not moving the ball a lot on the ground, they are able to use it to punctuate their air game, which is incredibly important for them. Defensively, they play out of their mind as well. They pick off UTEP 4 times. 3 of them come from Kalen Swanson. They get a sack as well, 6 tackles for loss, and they do pick up a fumble off the ground. Kicking game, they go 8 for 8 on all their extra points. They also sink 2 field goals, the longest one coming from 43 yards, and that's going to move Auburn up to 7-4 overall. Of course, the SEC standings don't move at all because we don't have any SEC games this week. So Auburn's going to move to 7-4 overall, with the Iron Bowl with Alabama still coming up to play. Now, UTEP, on the other hand, has it's a long day for the Miners. 7 for 25 on their passing, 28% completion. The 4 interceptions that we talked about. They take a sack as well, only 104 yards through the air. The ground game was a little bit nicer to them. They rush it 25 times and get 189 yards, and that's where their sole touchdown comes from. Defensively, it's not a bad showing when you're playing up an SEC team, especially one as good as Auburn. They do take an interception. They take a sack. They get 4 tackles for loss. Kicking game was pretty good. They sink their 1 extra point, and they go 2 for 2 on their field goals as well, with the longest one coming from 48 yards. Unfortunately, that is going to end UTEP's season. Now it's their 12th game. That was their game for bowl eligibility, and they're going to miss out as they fall to 5-7 overall. They're going to come in 5th in the West in the Conference USA at 3-5. So it's unfortunate for the Miners, who you would hope that coming into this game, it would have just been a decent game for them to finish off the season and try to get to bowl eligibility. But they did go 0-12 last year. So from 0-12 to 5-7 this year is an incredible step up for UTEP. So that's great for them, and hope to see a lot more important things from them if you're in the SEC, you look at this game and you almost are scared to death of Auburn at this point. They are peaking at just the right time. Moving on to our next game is going to go over to Starkville with Mississippi State taking on Southern Miss. And Mississippi State is going to edge this one in our game of the week. It's going to be close, but they are going to take it 24-23. Mississippi State's going to go 14 for 21 on their passing for 66.7% completion rate, 124 yards through the air, hit 5 different receivers. They do give up 1 interception, but they don't take any sacks. On the ground, they move it effectively, somewhat. They move it 38 times, only get 109 yards, but that's where their 2 touchdown comes from. The difference in this game is going to be the pick 6 that happens on the second play of the game. Mississippi State defense comes out, they're amped up, they're already ready to play in front of their home crowd, and on the second play of the game, they pick the ball off from Southern Miss and run it all the way back in the end zone about 30 yards. That ends up being the difference in addition to the missed extra point that's Southern Miss makes. We've talked about it on here before on how important extra points and field goal in your kicking game is, and this game is the poster child for it. Everybody goes perfect except for Southern Miss kicker on his 1 PAT. Everything else is exactly the same. If we look over at their passing stats, they go 6 for 13 on their passing, 46% completion rate. Not a great day, but on the ground, they're just moving it. 41 rushing attempts, 277 yards. They get 3 touchdowns there. Both teams take an interception away from each other. Both teams have 6 tackles for loss. Mississippi State gets a sack. Southern Miss isn't able to get one, but the missed extra point ends up being the difference, as well as Mississippi State's outstanding defensive play with that pick 6. So Mississippi State is going to move to 7-4 overall in the season. They're going to finish 4th in the West. We've talked about that before. They do still have the Egg Bowl coming up against Ole Miss. That could change some things around, but I don't think very much. Southern Miss, on the other hand, that is going to end their season. That's their 12th game. They're also going to fall to 5-7 overall, and they're going to be 6th in the Conference USA West at 3-5. A lot of Conference USA games here, and I think all of them were from the Conference USA West. So unfortunate for Southern Miss, who really played a great game, but that is going to end their season as they come over to the SEC and understand what real football is and just can't finish off the season. Going to head to our away games now, and it's going to be UTSA taking on Arkansas, and maybe I spoke a little bit too soon about the dominance of the SEC as UTSA rolls Arkansas. And this is I want to say this is a bad loss for Arkansas because UTSA, after finishing this game, is going to finish the season 5-7 as well. And they're going to be 4th in the Conference USA West at 4-4. But for Arkansas, who's going to end this, they still have one more game, but they're going to fall to 3-8 with this loss. If you just look at overall records, you expect them to lose this game. Maybe not as bad as they did, but you expect them to lose this game. But we've also seen how well Arkansas has played all throughout the season, and they shouldn't have lost as many games as they did, and they should not be losing this game. Yes, I know it's a road game. It's hard to win on the road in college football, especially in SimCFB. But Arkansas is a better team than UTSA. They're a better team than losing 41-13 to UTSA. UTSA is going to go 21 from 43 on their passing, 48.8% completion, 215 yards to the air, and 207 yards on the ground. 2 of their touchdowns are going to come through the air. 3 of their touchdowns are going to come from the ground. They are effectively mixing the ball on both sides. UTSA has just a complete game, and Arkansas can't do anything against them. They can't stop them. They can't move the ball effectively against them. And it's a complete game from the Roadrunners, which is great for them. And just unfortunate for Arkansas. UTSA's defense is going to take away 3 interceptions. 2 of them going to come from Justin Tupou. They're going to get 3 sacks as well, 9 tackles for loss. They're going to pick up a fumble off the ground as well. 5 for 5 on their extra points, 2 for 3 on their field goals, the longest coming from 39 yards. And UTSA finishes their season 5-7 overall. They're still going to miss a bowl game, but that's a huge win to go out to end their season, picking up a big game over a big team like Arkansas. Arkansas's day was not great. 20 for 37 on their passing for 51.1% completion. 297 yards through the air is great, but you only get one touchdown out of it. You throw 3 interceptions and you take 3 sacks. On the ground, you can't move it at all either. They get 28 rush attempts for 57 yards. And I believe this is the one game their main rusher had 20 different rush attempts, and he only ran it for about 20 yards or something like that. It's not a great day for Arkansas. This is one they want to put behind them. They want to put the rest of the season behind them. They still have one more game to go. Like I said, they are going to be 3-8 overall in the season with one more game here in the SEC. We'll check them out next week, but that's tough for the Razorbacks, that's a game that you should be coming to win. Now we're going to head over to Georgia, and Georgia's going to be taking on Georgia Southern, and they are going to win this game as they should. And this is important for Georgia because this is their 6th win of the season. This is going to get them bowl eligibility. Georgia takes this game 27-14 over a Georgia Southern team who's not bad. A 5-7 overall in the season. Also going to end their season 3-5 in the Sun Belt East. They're going to be 4th. They're not terrible. They actually have a decent game as well. Georgia just has a better game. 16 for 34 through the air for Georgia Southern, 47% completion, 109 yards, no touchdowns through the air, throw 2 interceptions, but they don't take any sacks. On the ground, they move it 37 times for 159 yards, and that's where their 2 touchdowns come from. Defensively, they actually have a good game. They do take away an interception from Georgia. They get behind the line of scrimmage 8 times with 2 sacks. And then on their kicking game, they go 2 for 2 on their extra points, and they don't get to attempt any field goals. But that at that point spread, obviously, that's not going to make a difference. Georgia has a pretty good day for a Georgia team who has struggled all season and has really started to put it together here at the end. 18 for 32 on their passing for 56% completion, 186 yards through the air, a touchdown. Do throw an interception and take 2 sacks, but the ground game moves it effectively as well, so you're able to mix it up. 25 rush attempts for 117 yards and 2 touchdowns. So 3 touchdowns on the day coming from both sides of the ball, which is really important for Georgia to continue to move forward. 2 interceptions taken away from Georgia Southern. They're going to get behind the line of scrimmage 6 times. No sacks, but that's okay as well. 3 for 3 on their extra points and 2 for 2 on their field goals, the longest one coming from 43 yards. So like I said, that is going to move Georgia to bowl eligibility at 6-5 with their Georgia Tech game still left to play. SEC, they're still going to stay 4-4. Of course, their SEC season's over. They're going to stay 3rd in the East. And that's a really important game for Georgia. It's great for them as they continue to advance through the season and really get ready for next. And now they have a bowl game to continue that understanding. Moving over to Kent State and LSU, and this is a bad game. This is a bad loss. If you are LSU, there's no way you should be losing this game. Kent State is going to take this one 34-28. And there's no excuse for it. Kent State is this is their 3rd win on the season, 3-9 overall. That ends their season. They're 1-7 in the MAC, 6th place in East. That's last. LSU, this is their 5th loss. They're going to be 6-5. They're doing great in the SEC. They're still in contention. They're still somewhat in control of their destiny in the West, and they still could go to the conference championship game in Atlanta. But this is bad. This is not great. And it's not even on a great game. Kent State, well, I say that, and we're going to get to the rushing game here in a second, because Kent State in the air goes 13 for 27 for 48% completion rate, 120 yards through the air, a touchdown. They don't throw any interceptions. They don't throw any sacks. That's a decent game through the air. It's on the ground where they just annihilate LSU. 54 rush attempts through 4 different guys, 402 yards on the ground. And they only get somehow they only get 3 touchdowns out of that. 402 yards. Defensively, they have a nice game. They don't pick any interceptions. They do sack LSU once. They get behind the line of scrimmage 4 times for 4 tackles for loss, which is nice. Uh, Kicking game, they have a nice game as well. 4 for 4 on their extra points, 2 for 3 on their field goals. The longest one coming from 48 yards. So to get their 3rd win of the season, Kent State has a great day, especially on the ground, like we talked about. LSU, they need to understand what happened. 22 for 34 in their passing, so 64.5% completion, a little bit over 64.5. 298 yards to the air, which on any day, that is a great passing line. Aaron Toomer, I think, is the quarterback for LSU, and he has a great day. He doesn't throw any interceptions. He takes 1 sack, 3 touchdowns to the air. Like we said, 298 yards and hits 8 different guys. Now, on the ground, LSU can't do anything, though. They move it through 4 different guys, 24 rush attempts for 99 yards and no more touchdowns. So they can't mix the air and the ground game to finish off this game, and that is probably what the difference ends up being. Defensively, they do about the same as Kent State, which you shouldn't be doing if you're LSU. If you're contending for the SEC West, you shouldn't be playing on the same level as the last place MAC East team. Only 4 tackles for loss. They don't take any interceptions. They don't sack the quarterback at all. Kicking game, though, kicking game's great. They go 4 for 4 on their extra points. They don't attempt any field goals, but you've got to score touchdowns to win, so that doesn't matter. LSU takes a bad loss to a bad Kent State team. They're going to move on next week to take on Arkansas, and hopefully they can put that behind them. But you've got to do better if you're going to represent the SEC West. You have to do better against a MAC team. We're going to move on to our last game of the week. It's going to be Wake Forest taking on Vanderbilt, and it's going to be another SEC loss. But this is one you expect because Wake Forest is a really good team. Wake Forest is a fringe top 25 team who's been in and out of that top 25 all season, as they should be, because this is their 9th win on the season. They're going to finish 9-3 overall. They're going bowling, should have a good bowl game. Vanderbilt, on the other hand, not a great season. They started off strong when they started SEC play, but this is going to be their 8th loss. They're going to finish 3-8 with still Tennessee coming up, so that's probably going to be a 3-9 season overall for them. Like I said, Vanderbilt started off strong in the SEC when they started their SEC season, and it just went off the rails quickly. Wake Forest has a great game, 21 for 36 on their passing, 58% completion, 245 yards through the air, no touchdowns, but they do have 2 touchdowns on the ground. See, I'm missing a touchdown in there somewhere. I'm not sure where it is, but they do have a great game. 179 yards on the ground, like we said, 34 rush attempts. They take 2 sacks and throw an interception, but they do take an interception back away from Vanderbilt and sacked them 1 time, in addition to 8 tackles for loss. They go 3 for 3 on their extra points. They missed their 1 field goal attempt, but hey, whatever. Wake Forest is going to finish their season with still a bowl game to come up, but they're going to go 9-3 overall in the season, 6-2 in the ACC. They're going to be 2nd in the Atlantic behind a Louisville team who's just playing out of their mind. Vanderbilt, on the other hand, not a great day for Vanderbilt, but you kind of expect that. 14 for 34 on their passing, 41% completion rate. 178 yards through the air is pretty good for a Vanderbilt team. They get their single touchdown through there, but they throw an interception and they take a sack as well. But they move the ball effectively, hitting 8 different receivers. So that's nice to see for Vanderbilt to build on something. They run it 27 times. They're only able to move it 41 yards. So ground game is completely non-existent for Vanderbilt. Defensively, they actually have a decent game. We talked about the 1 interception that they picked off. They get behind the line of scrimmage 3 times. 2 of them are sacks, and they pick up a fumble recovery. Not able to do anything with that fumble recovery, but they do pick one up, which is nice. Go 1 for 1 on their extra points and no field goals, which is, again, with this kind of spread, field goals aren't going to matter. It's a nice game for Vanderbilt. It's an expected loss, but it's one that you can live with. So that's not going to end Vanderbilt's season. They still have Tennessee coming up with their last game, the last rivalry game. But they are going to fall to 3-8 overall in the season. And that's going to finish off all our games for this week. Moving on to our player of the week, it's Auburn with Jarrell Walker the fourth, who, look at these. First of all, they demolish UTEP. We already talked about that. But he gets 21 targets. He catches it 18 times, and he gets 224 yards, which is good for 12.4 yards per catch. He goes over 200 yards. There's another Auburn wide receiver in this game that has over 100 yards. I think he had 184 yards or something insane. So Auburn had they had two wide receivers who went for almost 200 yards. Jarrell Walker is going to get 4 touchdowns. That other receiver gets 3. I should have made him co-player of the week because Jarrell Walker and that other Auburn wide receiver, they just played insane. So a great game from Auburn, a great game from Jarrell Walker, and there's not too much to say about it because the stats kind of speak for themselves, and they just annihilated UTEP. Taking a quick look at the standings, nothing changes, of course. We don't have any SEC games played this week. We do get a little bit of updated overall standings, but there's really nothing to change, so we're not going to spend too much time here. And, in fact, our questions don't change either. Tennessee, who's on a bye this week, they need to understand, or they have Vanderbilt coming up. Can they get to their 10th win? Probably, because it's Vanderbilt, but can they be the only SEC team this week or this year to get to double-digit wins? Can they get that 10th win? Over in the SEC West, it's still a toss-up. You don't know who's going to win, whether it's going to be LSU, Alabama, or Auburn. Let me remind you of the scenario. If Auburn beats Alabama in the Iron Bowl, Auburn wins the SEC West because they've already beaten LSU. Now, if Alabama wins the Iron Bowl and LSU loses, then Alabama wins because Alabama has lost to LSU. If Alabama wins the Iron Bowl and LSU wins the Arkansas game, then LSU is going to win the West. I'm not sure what the best case scenario here is for the SEC as a whole. We've already talked about LSU and the bad loss that they just took and the 6-5 overall record. Auburn coming off a great win on UTEP. Alabama coming off some great wins. So those are two teams you probably want to see representing the SEC West. LSU, who is a good team and has taken some bad losses, is probably not the team you want representing, but they are still mostly in control of their destiny. All they have to do is get through Arkansas. Now, after that, we're talking about the playoffs again. Even if Alabama doesn't make it to the SEC championship game, they still have an outside chance at sneaking into the college football playoff. Missouri has already been ruled out of the championship game, and they are still sitting on that edge with the possibility to get into the playoff. So it's interesting to watch these races, to what could possibly happen. These are things we're going to be keeping an eye on, and they're going to be important to watch for the SEC and how they continue forward as a conference. Next week, everybody's back in action next week with a whole lot of games. We are not going to hit all of these games next week on the show. It's just too many, but there are going to be some important ones. Number 9, Alabama is taking on Auburn in the Iron Bowl we just talked about. That is the contest for the SEC West, in addition to the Arkansas-LSU game, but the primary eyes are on that Auburn-Alabama game. That's the important one. Georgia's taking on Georgia Tech for a huge rivalry game there as well. Georgia has already hit bowl eligibility, but this is a good game for them to continue to tune up and understand their team. Ole Miss and Mississippi State going head-to-head in the Egg Bowl. That's a huge rivalry there. Florida State taking on Florida in another big rivalry as another ACC-SEC matchup. And then there's a third one there with Louisville taking on Kentucky. This probably isn't going to be close, and I'm saying this as a Kentucky coach. Louisville's probably going to demolish us, but this is a huge rivalry. People don't think about this one as much because we get all the other ones. We get the Alabama-Auburn. We get the Georgia-Tennessee, and we get all these internal SEC. And they think of this as a basketball rivalry. And it really is, but Louisville-Kentucky football game is always exciting. It's It's usually, hopefully, close, and maybe I'm kind of speaking some of this in hopes, but this is a big game for Kentucky, who needs this game to not only salvage their season with respectability, but to also make a bowl game at this point, which they're probably not going to do. Another big one, this one is bigger than the Louisville Kentucky game, is the border war with number 23 Kansas taking on number 12 Missouri. This is a huge game. I think everybody knows this is massive. It's nasty. They hate each other, but it's going to be a lot of fun. After that, we've got South Carolina taking on Clemson, and then Texas taking on Texas A&M, which is just another nasty one, right? Like, look at all these nasty big rivalries that we're getting because of SimCFB. And if you've made it this far in the program and you're not already part of SimCFB, look at this. We've got the border war back on. We've got Texas A&M going back on. This is the place to be to see good college football games. Taking a quick snapshot of recruiting, we do get a few good commits here with a 4-star guard and a 4-star wide receiver, both committing to Ole Miss. Adam Caffey out of Metter, Georgia, going to Ole Miss, the 4-star guard, a 4-star wide receiver. Sun Chang from Fort Walton Beach, Florida, going to Ole Miss as well. So Ole Miss moving outside of Mississippi to pick up some nice recruits. Tennessee's going to pick up 2 as well. Also going out of state with George Simpson, a 4-star wide receiver out of Salisbury, North Carolina, and Jason Bush, a 4-star tackle out of Cedar Hill, Texas. Florida's going to be moving out of state. They're going to pick up a really nice quarterback there, 4-star quarterback Kevin Jones, and from Alabaster, Alabama. He's going to be one to watch here in a couple years. John Lee, a 4-star free safety from Olmsted, Ohio, also heading down to Florida. Florida also picks up an in-state recruit with the 3-star Frederick Cook out of Davenport. So that's a nice pickup center for them. LSU picks up one as well. Elvis Cooley, a 3-star cooler out of Basel. I hope I'm saying that right. Basel, Louisiana. And then Thomas Hess is going to be a 3-star linebacker from St. Louis, Missouri, heading over to Texas A&M. Looking at our sSEC weekly top 25 recruiting rankings, we've got Wyoming on top. They're picking up 11 recruits already on the season. 11 recruits for Wyoming, which is going to lead all schools with 88.8 points on their score. Baylor's going to be tied, but they're only going to have 8. But look at the quality difference there. Baylor's only got 8 to Wyoming's 11, and they're basically the same if you want to score them. So Baylor's picking up really quality recruits. They've only have 8, and I'm saying that in air quotes. But they're picking up some nice targets there. We even have 3 teams picking up some now as well. Florida hitting number 15 in our rankings with 8 recruits. Tennessee coming up with their 2 pickups as well. Yeah, their 2 pickups as well. They got 6 recruits. They're number 18. And then Texas A&M with their pickup this week, they're going to have 7 recruits. They're going to be number 22 in our rankings. So a lot of good SEC teams picking up some nice recruits, looking towards that future, really bringing people in from all over the country. This week it's mostly the South, but they are coming from all over the country to come play in the best conference in the United States. So that's great to see. And that's going to do it for us this week here at SEC Weekly. I appreciate you guys hanging on. I'm sorry about the lateness again. Like I said, I have been sick this week. You've probably heard it here as we drag towards the end. But I appreciate you hanging on. If you made it this far and you're not part of it, come join us. Check out the links in the description. It's a whole lot of fun. This next week will be week 14. It'll be the last week of football as we gear up towards conference championship season, bowl season, college football playoff, which is a 12-team playoff, and then really start gearing up for basketball season. So I hope to see you guys over there. Good luck on your games next week, and I'll catch you.